Hang on, why do these globalists care about elections in Romania? Because they want to control the whole world. Hello there, you awakening wonders. Remember, we stream on Rumble every day. Join Rumble Premium, become part of our community of free speakers. We are still allowed to say stuff like this. Ursula von der Leyen publicly told us, she's the head of the EU, that if the Romanian people voted the wrong way, they had ways and methods of ensuring the correct results. The globalists have got their man as president in Romania. But how did they do it? Do you think they manipulate voting machines? Do you think they manipulate the media, social media? Do you think they have methods and means that go beyond democracy? Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Now, you might think Romania is a far-flung country and I don't care what goes on over there. But when you look at this story, you will learn a few things. One, the legacy media will prop up candidates and control narratives. Two, the EU, like other deep state bureaucratic entities, has ways of implementing power that go way beyond the democracy and the remit of the democracy that they purport to be protecting. And most importantly of all, to you, this could happen to you. They manipulate, control, shut down, ignore, and for all I know, absolutely violate election rules in order to ensure their candidates win. It could happen in Romania, could happen in Britain, probably has happened in Britain, might already have happened in 2020 in the United States of America. Pay attention to some of the things they say about Romania's populist candidate who's mysteriously lost at the last hurdle, even though he's a replacement for their preferred candidate who was arrested and banned for being in elections, like is happening all over Europe. Pay attention to this story because it will affect you. But way back in 2022, Ursula von der Leyen, head of the EU, told us, in plain sight, as they say, that they have ways of controlling the outcomes of elections. Listen to this carefully before we get into the story of Nicursa Dan's election victory.
We'll see if things go in a difficult direction. I've spoken about Hungary and Poland. We have tools if things go in the right direction. And people, as a body that is always, where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role.
What do you think she meant by we have tools? Let me know in the comments and chat while we look at legacy media's reporting on this great victory for democracy. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
The latest is that Nicursa Dan will be Romania's next president.
The reporter looks happy that Nicursa Dan has been elected, doesn't he? Look at his eyes. Sometimes I think that the legacy media don't even know that they are advocating for centralised tyranny continually. They know not what they do, as our King and Saviour said.
We've heard in the past few moments, that is the cheering you can hear for it. He leads this election runoff against George Simion by more than 900,000 votes. And the official commission says that there are now only slightly more than 800,000 ballots to be counted. In other words, George Simion cannot get to the total that Nicursa Dan has reached, so we know that Dan will be Romania's next president.
Just in case you're unfamiliar with the broad strokes of this Romanian election, and I would forgive you if that was your position as an American, have a look at Glenn Greenwald's excellent post on the subject. First, the West authoritarian overlords nullified Romania's election because their disfavoured candidate won. Then polls showed he'd win in the do-over, so they just banned him from the ballot. Now their puppet candidate finally won, and they claim democracy has triumphed. A huge victory for democracy, says Michael McFall there. Thank you, Romanians. Meet Nicursa Dan, the new president of Romania, genius IQ, etc., etc.
After a campaign that has divided this nation.
Certainly has divided the nation. The EU overruled the election results. You're free to vote for any candidate as long as it's this one. Okay, I'll vote for that one then. Victory! Victory! They're doing the same thing in France. They're doing the same thing in Germany. They'll do the same thing wherever they can. And when I say they in this instance, I don't mean just the EU. I mean bureaucratic organisations that are not themselves democratic and yet claim continually to be advancing democracy by ensuring that their preferred candidate wins elections. That's democracy. Yeah, that's democracy.
Between those backing a populist, nationalist, hard right politician.
Hard right, though. Oh, it's the right, but it's hard. Oh, that right. I got poked in the ribs by a bit of hard right.
A young man with not much political pedigree, but with a view of changing this country, of saying that it was that he was the anti-establishment candidate, picked against Nikos Rhodan, the mayor of the city of Bucharest, a 55-year-old, much more experienced politician, pro-West, pro-EU, someone much more from the political centre.
Someone actually waving an EU flag. Who in the world, in their right mind, believes that the EU is anything other than a bureaucratic organisation built to stifle and nullify the will of the people? Oh, because of the Treaty of Versailles, we can never have war again. You got nothing but war and nothing to fight for.
You'll remember in the first round of voting, it was Simeon who won, who's got a convincing victory. But after that, what seemed to happen is that while he certainly picked up votes, that a lot of the nation really coalesced behind Nikos Rhodan and decided that effectively they would pick him simply because they didn't want Simeon.
People really got behind this plucky outsider that the globalists wanted to win. I would pay attention to this simple fact. Whenever you find yourself believing what they want you to believe, question it with all the more ferocity. If you believe someone's good, that they want you to believe is good, question it. If you believe someone's bad, that they want you to believe is bad, question it. Because they have ways of making you think, speak, walk and vote. You don't belong to yourself anymore. They have captured and colonised your consciousness by controlling the information that you consume.
There are people here who are very ardently in favour of Nikos Rhodan, but there's a lot of people in that crowd who are carrying European Union flags.
Where do they even get the European Union flag? Where in Bucharest are people going, get your EU flags? Who's distributing those? Who's passionate about the EU? That's easy for you to say, Russell. You're an English person. You don't know what it's like to be in Romania, been under the rule of the Soviet Union. No, I don't know that. But what I do know is this. Ursula von der Leyen is not your friend. The EU is not your friend. NATO is not your friend. The UN is not your friend. Big Pharma is not your friend. The military-industrial complex is not your friend. And their media partners are not your friends. They don't care about your children, your life, your kidneys, your lungs, your walk with the Lord. All they care about is keeping you an obedient, servile larva trapped in a cell of imposed ignorance that they control.
And who said that they feared that Simeon would take them out of the EU, something that, I have to say, Simeon flatly denied when I asked him about it. There are people there who thought that Simeon was a retrograde candidate, the sort of person who would take Romania back towards the philosophy of its communist past, something that there are a lot of people who dread that sort of rhetoric. And there are plenty, particularly here in Bucharest, who see Nikos as a much more modern political figure. This was a closely run race, and perhaps only a week ago, it was Simeon who was the favourite. Tonight, the exit poll came out, and to everyone's surprise, predicted a wide victory in the end for Nikos Rhodan. Then the vote started to be counted and it looked a lot closer, but ever since then, actually the gap has got wider and wider. We may not reach exactly that remarkable yawning 10% gap that the exit poll predicted, but it won't be far off. And at the same time, I have to tell you, in neighbouring Poland, they've had the first round of a different presidential runoff, and there they're going to have a final two who once again will be a populist from the hard right pitched against a liberal centre candidate.
Well, fingers crossed the old polls vote the right way. Also, when I say the right way, I mean the way of the global establishment. Certainly I'm not naive about the threats and pressures of the hard right, if you want to accept such a ludicrous term. But what I would also propose is the biggest threat that you, your family and your nation face is the threat of globalist imperialism. It's a very real threat and it has some pretty significant weaponry, and you were watching that arsenal being deployed just there. Elsewhere across the legacy media, there's further favourable reporting available to you. It's extraordinary, in fact, to note that this electoral turnaround seems to have been mysteriously achieved. far be it from me to suggest that the power, manipulation and influence of globalist organisations might even extend to controlling elections. Has anyone considered that possibility? Let me know in the comments and chat if you think that they could summons up votes from somewhere, for example, like, I don't know, dead people. This is from Politico. Romania elected a moderate centrist versus hard right. Who determines what these terms are? Who chooses this vocabulary? Whose lexicon are we using, even when discussing this subject? Romania elected a moderate centrist as president in a major surprise after weeks when voters looked likely to propel another hard-right populist to lead a large European country. Despite coming a distant second in the first two rounds, the mild-mannered mayor of Bucharest, Nicolae Dan, gained a decisive 8-point advantage over his rival, the firebrand, George Simion. Or the last thing you want leading a country is a firebrand with strong views standing up for the people. No, what you want is a sort of a Joe Biden-style, mild-mannered, oncologically challenged, cerebrally collapsing stooge that you can maneuver and manipulate through the corridors of power to do your evil, cackling will. And it seems to be precisely this end that's been achieved in Romania. Here's the BBC that you pay for if you're British. France has put out a statement saying it categorically rejects allegations regarding alleged French interference in the Romanian presidential election. It's also urged everyone to act responsibly out of respect for Romanian democracy. Amazing. Earlier, the creator of Telegram messaging, Pavel Durov, said a Western European country had asked Telegram to block right-wing accounts and channels in Romania. Durov said he refused the request by saying, you can't fight election interference by interfering with elections. You either have freedom of speech and fair elections or you don't. What an extraordinary claim to be made there. When they say election interference, they mean election interference that might take an election in a direction unfavourable to their agenda, because they have an agenda. First they mask the agenda, then they fulfil the agenda. This is some reporting from Zero Hedge. When EU-backed officials in Romania fabricated the accusation that right-leaning presidential candidate Călin Georgescu was only popular because of a Russian disinformation operation on social media, the most common assumption was that this was purely a political stunt to draw voters away from his campaign. Instead, the establishment surprised many around the world with Georgescu's arrest and eventual disqualification from the race. Let me tell you this. What we might call secondary, or even in the terms of Donald Trump, shithole countries are regularly used to pilot ideas that might not fly in Anglophonic nations. For example, Australia likely piloted internment camps during the COVID period. Ukraine famously has biolabs. The CIA and even the New York Times now admits this. And when you hear phrases like Russian disinformation, is that not eerily reminiscent of language used during every election that Trump has stood in between now and his current presidency? Even if you are not a pro-Trump person, you have to recognize that if what you say you believe in is democracy and then you try to control the outcome of elections by any means necessary, you don't agree with democracy. You want tyranny, but you want tyranny of your choosing. And that's the only thing that I can think of that's worse than the type of dictatorships that even his worst detractors claim that Trump is leading. To this day, there is still no concrete evidence that Russia had any hand in the candidate's campaign or made any measurable effort to sway the election in his favour. At bottom, Georgescu was the clear favourite to win exactly because he was a populist nationalist and wanted to keep Romania out of the Ukraine conflict. Now we know that the globalists want that Ukraine conflict to continue. Even though, if you're Romanian, of course, this story is extremely significant and important just on its own merits. For me, an isolated Englishman living in America, what I find interesting is it's an opportunity to discern the agenda of powerful globalists, as well as tropes, methods and techniques that you'll likely see play out not only in elections but in any power struggle, including the struggle for information. If you are popular, if your message is reaching people, expect opposition, expect arrest, expect to be closed down. However, the qualities that endeared him to the public were also the qualities that made him a target for removal. The strategy has only resulted in even greater defiance by the voters and given a clear boost to George Simion, the Conservative alternative. Georgescu threw his support behind Simion, the self-proclaimed fan of MAGA and a staunch opponent of Romanian involvement in Ukraine. Simion recently crushed the existing government coalition in the do-over elections, causing Romania's Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu to resign. As critics of the action to stifle the populist movement point out, the government only seems to have made voters more galvanised against the status quo. It's clear that the progressive multiculturalist seat of power in Europe is fading, and they are willing to use any authoritarian means necessary to save democracy. Just so you know how the legacy media operates, a la Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, all of the popular top titles line up to parrot the same points. Check this out. The Guardian said, between a mathematician and a Trump-loving hooligan, Romania's stark presidential choice. From the Washington Post, a Russian-stoked protest movement lifts a MAGA-like populist in Romania. From Politico, Romania's Simion wants a broad coalition. Good luck with that. From the New York Times, in reference to Simion's possible win, Romania is about to experience disaster. From Foreign Policy, Romania's far-right movement is more extreme than you think. This is not journalism. This is agitpop for the globalist oligarchy. CNN only referred to Simion as a MAGA-courting populist, which is generally true, but in their tiny leftist mind, this accusation is a kind of irredeemable condemnation. The reaction from the corporate media in the West shows how valuable Romania is for the future plans of NATO and the EU. Sitting directly on Ukraine's southwest border with access to the Black Sea, Romania will be a key strategic position in a future war with Russia, should Europe be insane enough to pursue a conflict. There is also the matter of the European population becoming increasingly disenchanted with the progressive elites in power. Their open border politics and carbon controls have nearly destroyed most of the Union and left it in a third world shambles. A win for populists in Romania could herald even greater wins by other nationalist parties across the continent for the next few years. Any of you that admire Elon Musk will be familiar with Thierry Breton, European bureaucrat turned gangster, using rhetoric that wouldn't surprise you if uttered by Al Capone or Suge Knight. But to hear it on the lips of this fanciful and preening Frenchman is at least amusing while simultaneously terrifying. Here he is telling people that if elections don't go the way he wants them to go, they have ways of making you vote.
Dans le poids de la parole, attendons ce qui va se passer. Et pour l'instant, gardons notre sang-froid et faisons appliquer nos lois en Europe lorsque celles-ci risquent d'être circonvenues et que elles peuvent, et si on les applique pas, conduire effectivement à des interférences. On l'a fait en Roumanie, il faudra évidemment le faire si c'est nécessaire en Allemagne.
Oh, he just admitted that they fixed the election in Romania and cancelled the results of a person who by right should be the president. Georgescu should be the president of Romania. People voted for Georgescu. He was too populist, nativist and right-wing. And these Democrats and these defenders of democracy only defend the democracy that they believe in. And do you understand yet? That is not democracy at all. It's tyranny. They just use the word democracy so that we don't notice how tyrannical they are and rise up against them. So let us cut short our compliance and our obedience. Let us rise up en masse. Let us demand maximal true democracy. Let us oppose their institutions, close down their media, and ensure that they live in the terror that is their inheritance by opposing them at every possible turn. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat? Remember, today it's Romania, but tomorrow it will be the world. The reason they hate Trump is they clearly don't control Trump in the same way that they could have continued to control Biden. Any political conversation or nation voided of this kind of right-wing populist discourse is a nation that they control. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.